And hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show of today's 220-1201 Core 1A Plus study group. We are just getting the last remaining things done here. I have a few extra things that need to go out, that need to be sent, that are up on my screen. This looks really good. I'm checking cameras. Those look fine. Recordings are going. And I think we're in good shape. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you, chat room, for joining us. Good to have you here. Thanks for being here. Grab a drink, relax, get a Coca-Cola, get an iced tea. Just hang on out with us. It is a great day here. Beautiful day here. Really enjoying. So thankfully, not bad weather today, at least not at the moment. Give me a chance. But so far it's pretty good. I always worry about weather just because of internet connectivity, because you never know what's going to happen. But today looks really, really good. Now, having said that, of course, is it bad luck? Am I tempting the fates? Perhaps I am. But that's the way we sort of roll around here. Let's bring the air conditioner down a little bit, because I do like it a little cooler in here with all the lights on. Doesn't look like there's a lot of lights on, and really there isn't, but there is a lot of equipment running that is down on the left and right side. You can't really see it, but there is, the video switchers, the one that's red and green right there. You've got other equipment that's down there. It's all warmed up, it's heated up, and it is creating a little bit of that. But we are in good shape. Thank you for joining us. We have so much to go through today. Of course, today in this first hour, I have all new Q&A for you. Let's see if I could check cameras, check graphics. Those look good. There's your link there. If you wanted to put your digital push pin on the screen that we have, you could just go to professormesser.com/QA to go to that particular page so that we can see where you are. And I can check all my cameras. They all look good. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, Mal. Good to see you. Hope things are doing fine down in St. Vincent. So nice of you to join us again. Thank you for being here. This is great. Is ChatGPT good for studying this material? Yes, if you would like everything to only be 60% accurate, I think that's a great thing to use. I would never use anything LLM AI related for something as important as an IT certification exam. You're almost working against yourself when you deal with that. So I would recommend sticking to legitimate, well-established, and accurate resources. None of those things describe anything we've seen so far with AI. So AI is just a very bad study guide for this. So I would not recommend doing anything along those lines, unless you just like to be fed a lot of bad information, I guess. A lot of people are doing that. And then they show up and say, well, I didn't pass my exam. I'm like, yeah, I know you didn't, because you really should focus on things that are real, things that are accurate. And that's the important part. So that's why I say just avoid it. There's too many other really, really, really good resources out there to start throwing things into artificial intelligence and hoping you're going to get anything worthwhile, because you are not. I've already gone through all the tests. I've had it try to calculate things. I've tried to see just how far can this go. And the reality is it doesn't go very far. It's just too inaccurate to trust at the moment. So we will certainly focus on that. All right. Well, we've got a lot to go through today. 1.5 minutes to go. I'm sort of behind by 5 minutes today for some reason. Not sure why. We're getting there. We're trying to figure it out. I do sort of know. Why I'm behind 5 minutes. That's not entirely true. It's something that just isn't in my timing today to figure things out. But I think we're in pretty good shape because everything is working. You folks are here. I'm here. The screens are here. You're getting emails. You're getting notifications. It's so good. Busy morning. It's always busy. There's always something to do. There's always content to be written. And so it's never a dull moment, which is great. There's that part I really, really like. There's always something that needs to get done. So we can always work along those lines too, to make all of that happen. We will figure it out. A lot more to go through today. We got about 30 seconds before we get started. I have all new questions for you in this first hour. Of course, if you would like to submit a question for the second hour, you should be able to see that tab at the top of your screen to submit a question. So you can absolutely do that. So feel free to go through the process and figure these things out. In the meantime, though, speaking of process, it's time to get the entire process started here. Let's now go to our keynote. There we go. Thank you. Put it in the keynote. We are looking for a green light. Did we get a green light? We did. Like this. So absolutely, we are in good shape here. And I think it's time to start a live stream. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2025 Professor Messer 220-1201. That is the Core 1A Plus study group. Thanks for joining us for our study group today. I have all new questions for you that we have written for this first hour. So settle in, get a cold beverage, and just hang out with us while we go through this first hour of Q&A. Let's see how much you really know that comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I'll also tell you that in the second hour, I will answer any questions that you have. So I ask the questions in the first hour, you ask the questions in the second hour. I think that's a deal, isn't it? Something we can always work on when we're trying to get things done with our certification studies. Hopefully this is something that will help you as well. If you are here live, you can participate by going to the link that you see on your screen. So I will present these questions to you and you will be able to answer them live and in person and interactively by visiting professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that we are looking for, professormesser.com/QA. And I have for you, of course, a question we call our rewind question, because it is a question that I ask that comes from a previous study group, because I want to know if this is a question or something that you are already remembering from that previous study group. This question today, our rewind question today, is this one that asks, a technician is troubleshooting a VoIP application by measuring SNR. Which of the following would be best associated with these measurements? Now, remember, of course, we're answering this online. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The potential answers are jitter values, available bandwidth, wireless interference, default route, and latency statistics. So you've got a few things to pull from there to figure this out. This might be one you remember from last month. Hopefully it is. So I'd love for you to go to professormesser.com/QA, submit that answer. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Well, thank you for being here. We do one of these study groups every month. And of course, we're able to do this thanks to your support. Of course, our entire series of training courses are available for you to watch for free on YouTube at the link that you see right here, professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a daily A+ pop quiz question that you can get online or in your email inbox. You can find that either by going to our website and signing up for that email every day, or you can go see those questions on X, on Instagram, and those are great places to go to see. Oh, I also put one on LinkedIn. So there's another place to go. So all you have to do is go to professormesser.com/X, professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You get the idea. You can find us online at any of those particular links. We also, sometime in the first hour of this study group, will give you a secrets code and some instructions for obtaining a continuing education unit credit. That's a CEU. So when you hear somewhere in this first hour me talk about that, you will know exactly what to do to earn your CEU. This will be something that you can, of course, work on to get everything you need to renew your certification. If you don't have a certification yet, then there's not much to renew yet, is there? So you've got options though. At least you know which direction to go when that happens. today we're going to talk about questions that are specific to the 220-1201 exam. But of course, if you have been studying for the A+ certification up to this point, then you're probably aware that both series of exams are currently available as we sit here in July of 2025. That is because the 220-1101 and 1102, CompTIA calls this the version 14 on their website. This was released on April the 20th of 2022, but notice the exam retirement date is September the 25th of 2025. There's not much time left if you need to study and complete both of those exams by that date. So if you are starting your studies right now, this is not the version you want to study. This is the previous version that will retire on September 25th. This means on September 25th, you will no longer be able to take these exams. So if you're studying for these exams and you're pushing to get them by September 25th, keep pushing because you do have a little bit of time left. But if you are just starting your studies, you'll probably want to go to the 220-1201 exam. You probably didn't even realize it changed the slides there because these two exams are very similar to each other. These two exam series, the 220-1201 and 1202, is what CompTIA calls the version 15. It was released on March the 25th of this year, so it's a relatively new series of exams. The good part about this, of course, is that these two exams will retire in September of 2028. So if you are studying, you're just starting these studies, make sure that you look at the 1201 and 1202. We'll talk about timelines in a moment. Both of these exams are 90 minutes in length for each one of them. So the structure on the 1100 series and the 1200 series is identical to each other. We also have the 1201, you need to earn a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. And for the 1202, you need to earn a 700. You have to do a little bit better on exactly the same scale between 100 and 900. Regardless of which series you take, as long as you pass both of these exams, the moment you pass that second exam, your certification is good for 3 years. So it really doesn't matter when they retire exams. You know, once you finish passing the exam, the retirement of the exam doesn't matter to you. You are certified for 3 years. The good part is that you're certified for 3 years. You get an A+ cert, whether you pass the 1100 series or 1200 series. So you earn exactly the same certification. So taking one series over another, there's no difference in the ultimate cert that you earn. The difference is all about time at this point. We're getting very close to September 25th. Make sure you check your calendar. Make sure you understand how much time you have available to study for these exams. And you might want to make a decision on whether you want to go with one exam or the other. This is a visual view of this. So you can see that the 220-1101 that came out on April the 20th of 2022 will be retiring on September 25th. But we are in this middle period. Right there in the middle of this is where we are right now, which means you could take the 1100 series or you could take the 1200 series. You decide based on this chart how you would like to proceed. You've got some options there, and options are always good. This is a good time to be able to make that decision, but I would recommend if you are just starting your studies, the 1200 series is probably going to be the better choice for you. Sometime in this study group, I'll be talking more about that, maybe in the after show. If you have questions about it, you're welcome to submit those questions at any time from the link that we provided earlier at professormesser.com/QA. Now, we're also broadcasting this or streaming this live on the YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you look at the YouTube video description, about a day after we are done, you'll notice timestamps will magically appear in the exam or in the video content. So in that video description, you'll see a minute-by-minute breakdown of everything that we're doing here. You'll know exactly where that is in the video, and you can click those timestamps to go exactly where you would like to go. Those timestamps are there thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who goes through every bit of this, so you know you are getting an extremely accurate breakdown of this entire event, because that's really the important part of this. This is where we are focusing on the details. So hopefully that will give you a little bit more that you could use for your studies. We want to make this as easy and efficient as possible. If you are are someone who is starting your studies and you would like to find other people to study with, you would like to find people that are already certified that can give you their impressions, or perhaps get into a chat room, stream some video together, and go through a study session with other like-minded individuals, you can find them over on our Discord. We have thousands of people there studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. And that's usually where I'm hanging out when I'm not doing these live streams. You'll find us over there, professormesser.com/Discord. We would love to have you join us and be able to study along with everyone else who is there. Also, at some point, you will need to take your exam. There are a series of vouchers that you could purchase for your exam that are already discounted. So you could save a little bit of money instead of buying your voucher directly on the CompTIA website. Instead, you can go to professormesser.com/vouchers if you happen to live in the US, Canada, or a US territory, and you can purchase your vouchers there at a discount. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need anything special to put into your browser. You simply visit that particular website, and all of the prices there are already discounted. Another nice thing to have. Also, if you purchase your voucher on professormesser.com, you'll get an extra piece of information for free. This is my Exam Hacks ebook. This Exam Hacks ebook contains a list of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years for taking these exams, things that can help you with your study process. I even give you some strategies you can use during the exam itself that could potentially earn you a few extra points. And who doesn't want that? You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Well, now let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which is, a technician is troubleshooting a VoIP application by measuring SNR. Which of the following would be best associated with these measurements? Would that be jitter values, available bandwidth, wireless interference, default route, or latency statistics? Let's see how you answered this one. I'm going to stop the poll, and we're going to see how we did with this. And you can see that 55% of you say the answer is wireless interference. And then it goes to maybe a three-way tie for second place between jitter values at 16%. We have latency statistics at 14% and available bandwidth at 12%. And then in very last place, only 3% of you answered default route. The wireless interference was the one that really gave us the most number of entries. That was the majority answer here. And of course, if you're dealing with signal to noise ratio, that's what SNR is. That signal to noise ratio is really looking at how much of the signal is good in signal, how much of the information that we're receiving is bad, interference, things that are not the signal that we want to receive. And then we want to compare how much signal are we receiving versus how much interference are we receiving. And we can find that in this list. And SNR is something where we would measure and compare between those two with some type of ratio. So for example, the signal and noise, if they were exactly the same amount of signal as there was noise, which is very bad, would be a 1-to-1 ratio, signal to noise. What we're hoping to see is a 6-to-1, a 7-to-1, an 8-to-1, where the signal is 8 times stronger than the noise is. It overwhelms any type of interference so that the signal can at least make its way through. So as you are measuring things, there's a better view of this graph. This is a pretty good one because you can see the signal to noise ratio pretty good in this example. The green is the signal. We got a lot of signal. The red is the noise. It's way down here at the bottom. That's what you want. There will always be some type of interference. That's the nature of wireless communication. But this is a great way to focus on where you should look at understanding the throughput of a wireless network. So hopefully that will help you a little bit as you go through your studies and try to determine what that might be. Signal to noise ratio. Other folks answered things like jitter values. Signal to noise ratio does not directly have anything to do with a jitter value, although obviously the jitter values can be affected by the amount of interference that might be on a network, but that was not what the measurement of SNR is telling us. It doesn't tell us anything about how often the frames are arriving into your device, so it would not be jitter values. Wouldn't be latency statistics, because if it's a very good signal to noise ratio, there may be no latency on the network. So that's not something that's necessarily focused or has anything to do with SNR. We also have available bandwidth. Available bandwidth is something that gives us how much bandwidth, how much traffic can we send at any particular time. Of course, looking at SNR and looking at the measurements of SNR don't tell us anything about bandwidth. Obviously, those values the bandwidth can be affected by the signal to noise ratio, but the signal to noise ratio doesn't tell us anything about bandwidth. That's another example of really understanding what SNR is really telling us. And then we got default route. The default route is one that uses the IP routing. At this point, we're talking about the signal on the network. We're not really talking about IP or any other type of transport protocol. So in this case, default route would not apply. The answer we were looking for, and the one that the majority of you answered, was indeed wireless interference. So helpfully, that gives you some information that you need to be able to understand more about signal to noise ratio and what it does and what it doesn't tell you about the traffic that you're sending across that network. Hopefully that gives you a perspective of what you would like to know with signal to noise ratio and how you can worry about troubleshooting a wireless network and some of the metrics that are important during that troubleshooting phase. This would be in the section 5 of your certification exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with troubleshooting a wireless network. Now let's focus our efforts a little bit differently. One of the things that you will notice a lot about these exams is that the very first questions they ask on the exam are not multiple choice. They have nothing to do with multiple choice questions. That's because, like the question we just had, there were 5 possible answers in this multiple choice question. It was a single question and 5 answers that you could choose from. But one of the challenges, of course, from the perspective of CompTIA, is you could have guessed and got this one right. You could have guessed that it was wireless interference, and when you guessed that, you got the question absolutely correct, even though you may not have really known that that was the correct answer and why that was the correct answer. So CompTIA wants to make it a little bit more challenging. So they're going to give you a handful of questions at the very beginning of your exam that are anything but multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. And performance-based questions are simply any structure that is not multiple choice. It might be fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt. They might put you on a Windows desktop. They might have you a matching question. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order. Maybe it's a drag and drop. It's just another way of asking a question that's simply not multiple choice. But the thing to keep in mind is that the topics on these performance-based questions all come from the official exam objectives. So if you know your objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question, you will know the answer. That's the important part of this, and that's what CompTIA wants you to know as well. So I want to give you a performance-based question. As many of you know, on the 1201 exam, they got rid of a lot of rote memorization, but there are some topics that are so important in the basics of networking and computing that you have to do a little bit of memorization. So I wanted to step you through memorization. In this case, our performance-based question of the month is really more of a fill-in-the-blank question that asks, specify the colors for a T568B wired connector. And I simply have pins 1 through 8 on the screen. So this is not something, if you're listening in on the podcast side, you don't even have to see the graphic that's here. It is simply showing you an RJ45 connector, and pins 1 through 8 are marked on that connector. So tell me what goes in pin 1, what goes in pin 2, what goes in pin 3, in pin 4. Now, the good part about this is, well, I don't want to give you any hints. I'll tell you what the good part is once we do the question, because I want you to really go through the process of understanding what really goes into each one of those pins. This is something that is a fundamental bit of knowledge that you need to know. For example, if you're plugging in a cable, how do you know if that cable is going to work? Well, you can look at the cable before you plug it in to be able to make that determination. But if you don't know what wires are supposed to go where, how are you able to make that determination? That's our challenge, of course. So make sure you are familiar with this as well. Go through the details, see what you happen to think the colors for a T568B connector happen to be, and use the link on your screen to be able to submit those. Go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to submit the answers for this particular question. So this is one that I think if you're in the process of studying for your exam, you do run into these rote memorization type things. As I mentioned on the 1200 series exams, there are a lot fewer things to memorize, just rote memorization. For example, on the 1200 series, you don't have to know the details about every single wireless standard that was ever released ever. But on the 1100 series, you still need to know those things. So they did make some decisions on the 1200 that took us more away from spending time memorizing and more time understanding how to go through the troubleshooting process. Although ironically, they did remove the rote memorization of the troubleshooting process in the 1200 series exams. I know, the irony, but there we are. I don't make the exam objectives. I just tell you what's on them. And we all work together to figure those details out. See if you happen to know as we go through this. If you think you know the answers to this particular performance-based question, you can submit your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Please, of course, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. This is a very useful thing to know, by the way. You will use this particular piece of information throughout your entire career. I know that I have. I've been watching and looking at the way that cables are wired for 30 years in this industry. So you will be doing this as well. But you have to know what the wires are to be able to know if you plug in this cable, is it going to work? That's why we really need to know these colors. It's incredibly important to have that there. We're doing so much wired connectivity these days. It's so important. So let's see how you did with this one. A number of you have submitted your answer already. So let's just show you the entire set of connectors to be able to have this here. Of course, we have a T568A standard and a T568B standard. We tend to see the A standard used in more U.S. government, federal government facilities, but I even see a lot of them using the B standard just because it seems that all of our corporate environments and even the things that you do at home and probably everything that you've got plugged in at home is probably using the colors that are based on the T568B standard. It tends to be the more popular standard. So let's look at the standard. Have you locked in your question? We're now going to reveal the answer for this performance-based question to specify the colors for a T568B wired connector. And we have a number of different colors on the screen so that you can see what those differences are between the A and the B. So you can sort of get a feel for what these things are looking like and understand the differences between all of them. So let's go through each one of these wires one at a time. You can see pin 1 and pin 2 are both orange, but pin 1 is a white and orange, and pin 2 is orange. Pin 3 is white and green. You'll notice the matching green one is on pin 6. This is a very common configuration, especially for Ethernet, because prior to gigabit Ethernet, the 100 megabit and slower Ethernet only needed 4 of these wires, and it used pins 1, 2, 3, and 6. For gigabit Ethernet, however, we use all 8 pins. So we need to make sure that pins 4, 5, and 7, and 8 are also incorporated into this particular configuration. And in T568B, pin 3 is white and green, but pin 4 is blue, and pin 5 is white and blue. The other green, the solid green, is on pin 6. And then lastly, pin 7 is your brown and white, and pin 8 is brown. Now, it may seem that this is, now we not only have to know this, but 568A, the good part is 568A is very similar to 568B. There are the things that are exactly the same between the two are pins 4 and 5 and pins 7 and 8. So blue, the solid blue and the blue and white and the brown and white and the solid brown all stay exactly where they are, regardless of whether it's T568A wiring or T568B wiring. That's what we want to know. And so you can see that for B, we have orange in pins 1 and 2. In the A version, you simply switch the orange and you switch the green. That's the only difference. So that makes it a little bit easier to memorize if you're trying to figure out A or B. You should be able to pick up, maybe you have an Ethernet patch cable. near you. Pick up that patch cable, look at the back of that cable, look at the connectors, and figure out, is this one wired T568A or is it wired T568B? Functionally, they're identical in the way they work. Pin 1 is connected to pin 1. Pin 2 is connected to pin 2. The only difference is really the colors. And the reason that is important is because we want to have a standard color scheme throughout our entire network. It makes it easy when you're punching down cables. It makes it easy when you're putting things into a patch panel. It makes it so much simple to do this. So make sure you are familiar with this as well. This will be something that could appear on your exam. And as I mentioned, it's going to appear in your real life world. So make sure you are familiar with this. Some folks in the chat room were even saying, well, when are we going to be tested on this 1200 series? It already was released in March. So you can take the 1200 series exams right now, and they might ask you about T568A and T568B. That would give you exactly the information that you're looking for. If you've not done this and looked at the back of a wire, you really should. Let's just look at T568B. You should be able to pick up the back of that cable. There it is. And you should be able to look at the colors of the wires to determine what standard is being used. So this is a very practical example. You may even want, let's just overlay right on top of each other. So there's our white and orange, orange, white and green, blue, white and blue, green, white and brown, brown. And you can see it matches the picture that we have for that particular jack. Let me get this out of the way again. We can see it. Those are indeed the colors. So if you can see that on your cable, then you've got a 568B that you can see there. I know my head's right there in the 568. That says B right there because that is the 568B standard. But you already knew that because you already know the colors. You don't have to have a title there at the top to be able to see that. Well, hopefully that's given you some idea, some cues about things that you should know about with this particular exam. If you are not familiar with T568A and T568B, I would highly recommend that you spend some time looking that over. As I mentioned, it could indeed be a question on your exam. And of course, it could, of course, be something you run into in everyday life when you are working as a network administrator, a system administrator, or just setting up cables at home. It's really going to be helpful to be able to do that. Well, now that we've gone through your performance-based question of the month, I would like to shift gears a little bit and go back to a multiple choice question. So let's do our next question on this list. This next question asks, a purchase request has specified 100% sRGB as a technical requirement. Which of the following would best describe this requirement? Is that resolution, refresh rate, brightness, color gamut, or pixel density? A purchase request has specified 100% sRGB as a technical requirement. Which of the following would best describe this requirement? Is that resolution, refresh rate, brightness, color gamut, and pixel density? If you think you know the answer, of course, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Use the link on your screen, ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and let's see if you really know what the answer to this might be. This might be a good one. This obviously is a 1200 series question. If you're studying for the 1100 series exam, this particular question does not apply to you. Although you may be able to figure it out because a lot of the other parameters that are in this question are on the 1100 series exam. So it might be a calculatus limitatus type of situation for you to figure out what the right answer might be. These are things that happen all the time, is that users will show up. They go, I have a particular technical requirement I want to meet. This is the requirement. Go find a technology that will fit these requirements. That's something you will do constantly in the world of IT. So you, of course, need to know what all of these requirements are so that you can more realistically, more logically step through all of the possible options for you. So let's see how you did. A lot of people have answered this one already. I think we might have done really well with this one. The question again asks, a purchase request has specified 100% sRGB as a technical requirement. Which of the following would best describe this requirement? Is it resolution, refresh rate, brightness, color gamut, or pixel density? We will stop our poll 85% of you say the answer there is the color gamut. But then everything else is a single digit. 5% for resolution, 5% for pixel density, 3% for brightness, and 1% for refresh rate. But is color gamut really the thing that we're looking for in this example for sRGB? Well, if you are familiar with that term, the sRGB term, it is indeed describing how much of the colors are available for us to see on that particular output. In this case, it's probably a screen. It's probably some type of monitor, LCD monitor. So this is one that tells us how much of that is accessible on that particular model of monitor. As many of you are probably aware, every monitor is not exactly the same. Some are able to show us colors much better than others. And of course, the better monitors cost more money. Why do they cost more money? Because they're able to show us much better color differences on the output of the screen. And if you're somebody who's working on video editing, you're working on a print type of work, maybe you're working on photography editing, those colors need to be exactly correct on your screen. And so color gamut is a measurement that tells us how accurate and how broad are the set of colors that we're able to see. You'll often see this diagram that shows the color gamut. It is this funny looking teardrop shaped upside down teardrop, which is supposed to represent to us how many colors the human eye can see. And then overlaid on top of that, you can see a number of very common standards for that. And sRGB is a very popular standard for this. For example, you may have not even noticed this. I went out to, I think, the Dell website, and I just said, bring me up a bunch of monitors, show me the technical statistics for these monitors, the technical information. And it showed all of these. In fact, you can see that I brought there's a 32-inch 4K monitor here and a 43-inch 4K monitor here. That sounds really nice, actually. Both of these, this one is an IPS black technology. This one's just IPS, different heights, but you can see the color gamut is specified in the technical specs for these monitors. And you can see that there's one that has a 100% sRGB. It complies to that standard 100% of the time. It matches that particular standard. This 43-inch monitor, although it's much bigger, it only is a 95% compliant sRGB. So if our focus is getting a true color representation from that screen, we probably want to go with the 32-inch 4K USB if we're trying to decide between these two, because this one has a much better color gamut than the others have. That's a pretty important consideration. And of course, as I mentioned, the expensive monitors are always the best. Usually it's the OLED monitors that really give you a beautiful representation of color. So you may be paying a little bit more, but you are getting a much better and much more accurate set of colors on that OLED screen in many, many cases. So hopefully you're familiar now with color gamut. 85% of you are. It was not resolution. Resolution tells us information about the 4K resolution. Maybe it gives it to you in number of pixels. You can see that's 1920 by 1080 is an HD resolution, for example. Those are not specifics we need to know for the exam, but it's important to know what that resolution term is referring to. We also need to know pixel density. I have a good example of that in the videos on my site that describe how one pixel density might be different than another for something like a monitor. We also have brightness. Brightness is an important consideration for a monitor, especially if you're in a very bright area. You need to be able to see these colors as they're going through. And then a refresh rate. I also show refresh rate differences between different types of frames that are coming through in a single second. Those are all part of the video that I have available. If you want to find all of this information, they're in my video from my 1201 series, section 3.1, and this is in my video for display attributes. So that'll tell you exactly the information you need to know. You did extremely well on that one. Color gamut, 85% of you answered that one, and that is exactly what we were looking for when we see 100% sRGB. Let's do another multiple choice question, shall we? Next on our list is this question that asks, which of the following would best describe a Type 1 hypervisor? Which of the following would best describe a Type 1 hypervisor? Would it be containerization, bare metal, PAAS, sandboxing, or Intel virtualization technology, or VT. A type 1 hypervisor. See how familiar you are with hypervisors. There was a little bit added to the 1200 series when it came to hypervisors and virtualization and cloud-based technologies and configuring all of those together. But it's all in there. You've got an idea of where that would go. If you think you know the answer, of course, go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to instead lock in your answer online so that we can compare it to you and everyone else who is answering. Another good reason to be here for our live events is that you can only use that link if you are here live. So hopefully you will know this a little bit. You've got a big breakdown on this one. So hopefully that will give you an idea of what this one is. If you don't know the answer, it's a multiple choice question. Take a guess, which is, by the way, is exactly what you should be doing on your actual exam as well. You are not penalized for taking a guess. You are penalized, really not penalized. You just don't get any points if you get it wrong, but you do get points if you get it right. So there's no penalty for guessing. You should always be guessing if you don't know the answer. Hopefully you know the answer. That's where you should go. Let's see if you know the answer. The question again asks, which of the following would best describe a type 1 hypervisor? Is it containerization, bare metal, PAAS, sandboxing, or Intel virtualization technology? Let's stop our poll and see how we did. Oh, we're a little torn. We went back and forth on this one. We did not get a majority, but the plurality of you answered bare metal. 41% of you chose that one. 31% of you chose Intel virtualization technology, or VT. We have 16% that said sandboxing, and then down to single digits, 8% said containerization, 4% said platform as a service. So what was the answer that we were looking for? It was indeed bare metal is what we were looking for. Type 1 hypervisors and type 2 hypervisors are terms that you need to know for the 220-1201 exam. You don't have to know this one for the 1100 series, for those of you that are watching, but you do need to understand for the 1200. What we refer to as a type 1 hypervisor, which is just an awful name, by the way, because it really doesn't describe what it is. This is what we commonly refer to as a bare metal hypervisor. That's because with a type 1 hypervisor, you don't need to load an additional operating system on top of your computer. You don't need Windows, you don't need Linux, you don't need Mac OS, you don't need iOS, you don't need iPad OS, you don't need Android, you don't need any of those. All you need is the hypervisor software itself, and it is effectively an operating system and virtualization platform all in one. It handles everything for you. And because we're simply installing the hypervisor on a system with nothing else on it, we refer to that as bare metal, which is certainly referring to that physical device that we are installing the hypervisor on. Some of you may have downloaded a hypervisor and run it on your Windows desktop or your Mac OS desktop. You might have downloaded VirtualBox. You might have downloaded a virtualization product from another company like EMC or like Oracle or others that may be available out there. Those types of hypervisors that you're running on top of an existing operating system are referred to as a hosted hypervisor because you're already running it in Windows. So you're running Windows and a hypervisor and then running a virtual system on top of that. So it's a little bit different when you're working with type 2 because you have that underlying operating system. If we were to compare these two, there they are. There's the comparison. A type 1 hypervisor looks exactly the same as type 2, but you'll notice the operating system, that purple bar, doesn't exist on a type 1. So those are your big differences between hypervisors. If you're someone who's working through hypervisors, you're trying to do more virtualization, you're working with VMware, you're working with Parallels, you're working with VirtualBox, you're working with any one of these, then you may be using a type 1 or you might be using a type 2 hypervisor, and you should know what you are using when you sit down and work on those systems. Some of these companies that make hypervisors make both kinds. So you can purchase one that is a bare metal hypervisor or you can install one that is a hosted hypervisor on your existing platform. So you've got options there. Make sure you're already familiar with those options. And if you want more information on these, I detail all of this in my video for section 4.1, and the video name is Virtualization Services. Now you can already tell in this 1100, 1200, and really all of the A+ exams, there's a lot of content in these certification exams. There's hardware, there's operating systems, there's security, there's networking, there's cloud-based technologies, there's virtualization, there's protocols we need to know, there's a little bit of device configuration we need to know, there's command lines, there's mobile devices. There's so much we have to be able to get our arms around to be able to pass and earn your A+ certification. And that is our goal. With the 1200 series exams, if you were to look at both of those courses, it's 137 videos across 19 hours of content. That's a lot of videos for someone to go through. And I certainly recommend making notes as you go. There's a lot of information to have as part of the notes that you would be creating or using for this particular certification. So one of the things that I did is I created a set of notes that takes everything from the videos, all of the text, all of the important graphics, and all of the important charts, and puts them into one single document. These are my course notes. These give you all of the information, so you don't have to spend your time writing any of this down, and it very accurately takes all of those important charts, all of those important graphics, and puts them into our set of course notes. These course notes are not only available as the PDF that you just saw, but you can also use or get the physical edition, which of course is identical in content. So we have, for example, let me bring up that screen again. So you saw the DNS information that's there. It's the same information that's on the screen. So you're not missing anything, regardless of which you get. And in fact, if you get the physical edition, I print this out on demand and ship it over to you. While you're waiting on this to arrive, you get full access to the downloadable digital edition as well. So you've got some options on how you would like to be able to study your materials. Maybe you take your own notes. That's fine too. But if you want a little bit of extra, maybe something that you can take along with you, having a file that you have on your system, pull it up at any time and be able to reference this as you're working with your studies, this might be something you might want to look at. And if you get both the Core 1 and Core 2 at the same time, you also get a little bit of a discount, which is always good. You can find out more about this on our website. Simply choose the 220, 1201, or 1202 menus and choose the option for the course notes, or simply visit professormesser.com/1201 notes, 1201 notes. And you can find out all about that. It's a great way to support what we're doing here on this site, and another great way to perhaps help yourself with your studies in preparation for earning your A+ certification. Speaking of earning our certification, let's do another question, shall we? What? You would like a printer question? I'm glad you asked for one. Here's one that is a laser printer question. This one asks, output from a laser printer includes random dots and specks on each page. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a fuser issue, poor cleaning process, an incorrect printer driver, low toner, or calibration is needed? We have all of these are important things to consider for laser printing, but which one is the one we are looking for? The question again asks, output from a laser printer includes random dots and specks on each page. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a fuser issue, poor cleaning process, incorrect printer driver, low toner, or calibration is needed? One of those has got to be what we are looking for, and certainly understanding how to troubleshoot bad output is an important part of this exam. That is the exam objective that you need to know. And this is one that applies whether you're studying for your 1100 series, your 1101, or the 1201. So for those of you that are joining us today to get some of those 1100 series questions, we got the one. We have one here that you can work on. Now, if you've never worked on a laser printer before, that's okay. We've got examples and demonstrations and a breakdown of everything you need to know in our videos. We can certainly help you step through all of that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, output from a laser printer includes random dots and specks on each page. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is this a fuser issue? Is it a poor cleaning process? Is it an incorrect printer driver? Is it low toner, or is calibration needed on this printer? Let's find out. We got just over 50%. 51% say it's a poor cleaning process. I feel attacked right now. Oh, you mean the printer is a poor cleaning process? I understand. 19% of you say it's a fuser issue. We have 18%, almost a tie there, that say it's calibration is what we need. And then we have 7% that said low toner. And down in last place is 4% with an incorrect printer driver. Those are the answers. If we go with the majority of the answers that we received, poor cleaning process is what we received. Trying to understand how to troubleshoot bad output can be a challenge. Every printer is a little bit different in how it operates, but there are some fundamentals, especially with laser printers, that we need to know about. With the 1200 series, we don't have to memorize detailed information about the laser printing process. Those of you that are studying the 1100 series, you're wondering now why you had to go through that. I think it's actually pretty important that you know how a laser printer operates. It's just one of those things that they decided not to put into the 1200 series exam. But we still need to know how to troubleshoot a laser printer, and that's where this information comes from. If you're getting a line down the page like this one, that's not very good. That gets right in the way of trying to see. It's probably on an inkjet, it could be the print heads. On a laser printer, the drum is probably scratched. I've had that happen to me a number of times. Now, if you've got a faded print or it's just blank, then you probably are out of ink or you're out of toner. That's probably an easier one to do. But our problem was really with speckling or just random things showing up on the page. That's probably because on a laser printer, the drum has to be cleaned every time it goes around. And to print a single 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, it may rotate 3 or 4 times, and it can pick up toner and keep adding pieces of that toner to other rotations as it's going around and around. And those look like little dots, little specks, or little smudges on the output, even though there was nothing really that was supposed to be printed in that particular area. So it's probably related to the cleaning process of the laser printer. Different laser printers are able to clean in different ways. You may need to get a maintenance kit and replace different components, or it may be that you have to replace the entire toner cartridge. Maybe the cleaning process is in the toner cartridge. It very commonly is. So sometimes simply replacing the toner cartridge solves this particular issue. So our bad output in this case with echoing images or speckling that's on the page is indeed what 51% of you chose, which was the poor cleaning process. We did have 19% that said it's a fuser issue. The fuser is that thing that makes the laser printer output hot. You pick up the piece of paper at the end, it's warm. It's a warm paper. That's because it used heat and pressure to melt the toner onto the page, and the device that does that melting and the pressing is the fuser. If it came out of the printer, it was a cold piece of paper, and you were able to use your finger and smudge the information that's on the page, then it would be a fuser issue, but that was not the problem we ran into. 18% said calibration was needed. If we're getting output that is too faded or we're getting output that is too dark, then we probably would want to perform a calibration, but that was not our problem here. Our problem here was random things being put onto the page, not a calibration problem at all. 7% said low toner. That would be more of a faded view, but it wouldn't result in random dots and specks on the page. And then an incorrect printer driver. Normally when it's a bad printer driver, the entire page is garbage or is information that we did not choose to print. It's not just a little bit of speckling and dots that might be on a particular page. If you're seeing random things appear, it's probably because there's a poor cleaning process, and you will need to address that with your laser printer. Another one of those things that helps if you're trying to troubleshoot a printing problem. Let's now move to another section, another question that is a 1200 series question. So we had, of course, this particular question about printers applied to both the 1100 and the 1200 series exams. This one, I believe, is only a 1200 series, and it asks, a new employee's mobile device is COPE. Which of the following would best describe this device? Would it be requires a factory reset before use, uses a non-standard OS, owned by the organization, must be used over the VPN, or does not use an MDM? More abbreviations. Abbreviations upon abbreviation. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. You want to follow the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. That QA, what's that QA stand for anyway? You have to figure out the details. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. The question again asks, a new employee's mobile device is COPE. Which of the following would best describe this device? It requires a factory reset before use, uses a non-standard OS, owned by the organization, must be used over the VPN, or does not use an MDM. If you think you know the answer, lock it in, and we will see how well you do with this one. This topic of COPE is a new topic for the 1200 series. So if you're studying for the 1100 series and you're wondering, what are you talking about? That's why you're wondering it, because you don't have to know this one for the 1100 series. You do have to know this one for the 1200. So make sure you're familiar with that. Let's see how you did with this one. A new employee's mobile device is COPE. Which of the following would best describe this device? Requires a factory reset before use, uses a non-standard OS, owned by the organization, must be used over the VPN, or does not use an MDM. We're going to close our poll and see how we did with this one. Another big, strong answer. 85% say it's owned by the organization. And then it's all single digits from there. We got 5% that say require factory reset before use. We got 5% that says does not use an MDM. 3% says it uses a non-standard OS, and 2% says it must be used over the VPN. 85% is a pretty strong answer, and indeed that is the correct answer. You will find this in section 1.3. Mobile device management is the name of the video it's associated with, and of course it's in section 1.3 of the official CompTIA exam objectives. COPE is something you might run into. Some organizations do this where they don't want you to bring your phone in. They don't want you to have any connection between your personal mobile device and the mobile device that you would use for work. This might be because there is a security issue. There's concerns about sharing the data between all of those. All of them are valid security concerns. So if a company is purchasing phones for their employees, it is often referred to as COPE, which is corporate owned, personally enabled, which means they will allow you to use it as both a corporate device and as a personal device, because they can manage and partition both of those sections off in the phone so that they can really ensure that their data is safe, but also give you a single phone that you can walk around with. They want you to be able to do that. So the challenge here, of course, is that you don't have control of this device. It's not your device. It's not your phone. So the organization is the one that is controlling, managing, and making sure that all of these devices are being used in the appropriate way for the corporate policies. Those will be important as well. If this is one that you get to choose the corporate device, maybe they'll say you have the choice between this iPhone or this Android device. That's more of something along choose your own device, CYOD. Choose your own device is one where you get to decide which one of these devices you will use, but the company still owns it. This company still manages it. It's still their device that you would have to turn in if you were to leave the organization. COPE, corporately owned, personally enabled, was the answer that we were looking for. 85% of you chose that one. You were spot on with that particular answer. Hopefully you're now, if you've never heard of COPE before, now you do know of it. And now you'll be able to get that question right on your exam. If you're studying this information for a renewal of your certification, maybe you already have your A+, or you need some type of continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU, Continuing Education Unit. To be able to earn that 1 hour and able to earn the email that I'm going to send to you, you must follow these instructions. You must go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put July 2025 Core 1 or something close to that so I'll know what we're talking about. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, COPE VPN MDM. I just tried to get all of the abbreviations and put them all in one single set of things you need to do. You can also add any other text to that email that you would like. You could submit it. It comes to me, and then it takes me about a week to turn these around. The process again, you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, and that Contact Us screen, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put July 2025 Core 1. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret abbreviations, the acronyms of the month, which are COPE, VPN, MDM. This is something that is unique to only July of 2025, so I'll know that it definitely came from this particular one. As I mentioned, it takes me about a week to turn these around, sometimes a little bit longer, as some of you have found with the one that we did last week, or the ones that came in last week. If you do that, you will absolutely get a response back from me in about a week or so, but please be patient. I will get to you, I promise. I go through these as quickly as I can to kind of sift through and find exactly what we're looking for. That is a good way for you to earn a CEU. I realize not all of you collect CEUs. Some of you simply use CertMaster CE. Maybe you take a higher level certification. It's not required that you collect CEUs to renew your certification, but it might be useful as you go through this. We've got time for another question. Let's quickly have a look at that. This next question is one that will apply to everyone, whether you're studying for the 1100 series or the 1200 series. This question asks, a technician is adding a TXT record to a DNS server. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this addition? Would it be associate an IPv6 address to a web server, specify an alternate name for an existing server, verify domain ownership, separate the network into different logical sections, or advertise the public IP address of the email server? All of these things DNS related, aren't they? So you're going to have to figure out which one of these we would be doing. The question again asks, a technician is adding a TXT record to a DNS server. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this addition? Associate an IPv6 address to a web server, specify an alternate name for an existing server, verify domain ownership, separate the network into different logical sections, or advertise the public IP address of the email server. You think you know the answer? Use the link that is right here on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you happen to know which one this might be. This might be a good thing to talk about from the perspective of knowing Core 1 material, but as I mentioned, this applies to both the 1101 and the 1201. So it doesn't matter which version of the exam you're planning to take. This is a question for you. You have to be really good to know what the differences are in all of those different DNS records. This is a very specific DNS record. Hopefully that will give you a perspective of things you need to know. Let's see how you did with this question. The question again asks, a technician is adding a TXT record to a DNS server. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this addition? Associate an IPv6 address to a web server, specify an alternate name for an existing server, verify domain ownership, separate the network into different logical sections, or advertise the public IP address of this email server. And again, we're really torn on this one. And I can absolutely understand, because DNS and the records that are in a DNS server can be relatively confusing. As someone who has administered and set up DNS servers for a couple years now, I will tell you that touching a DNS server is a very nervous thing for me to do. DNS servers are sort of the beginning of everything. If you mess up a DNS server, you've effectively brought down your network. So I always tell people, don't make a change in that DNS server unless you really know what you're changing, which is one of the reasons that CompTIA still has these DNS records in their exam objectives, because they're super, super, super important that you know what these are for. The record that we're talking about here, though, is a text record. That's what the TXT stands for. And as many of you know, there's all kinds of different types of text. There's a lot of different things you could do with a text record, but it really is a record where you can put human readable information into this record that other people would be able to retrieve from your DNS server. So you could really put anything into that text record you would like. It's only the people retrieving that information that might use that particular text record. This can be used for verification purposes, for example, because only you or the administrator of that particular domain has access to the DNS server. That's because the DNS server, probably more than any other device that you are configuring, that is the most important one to provide access into your network, either from the internet or to the internet. The DNS is incredibly important. But since it is so locked down, it is so secure, the only people that have access to the DNS server configuration are the people in charge of that domain associated with the DNS server. Well, this is a great way to confirm that you really are in control. If I tell you, go to your DNS server, put in a text record, and in that text record, put this text. And if you do that and I access your DNS server, I can see if that record exists. And if it's in there, then I know that you must have access to that server. And therefore, by definition, you must have access to that entire domain. So that is one that becomes really, really useful. That's a common verification process. In fact, if you look at the text records on my DNS server, you will see a number of text records there that were simply added because they were about verifying the domain configuration. I have to leave them in place for the duration. We also use these text records as part of our email security efforts. So if you want to specify in an SPF type of text record, the type of mail server you're using, maybe it's a DKIM record that provides a public key that people can look at to be able to confirm a digital signature on your emails. All of that can also be added into a text record. So these are great ways to be able to add additional functionality by simply adding information into a text record that's in our DNS server. And that's why in this particular case, we're trying to figure out the answers. The one that we're looking for to verify domain ownership is the only one in this list that has anything to do with a text record, and 37% of you got that one absolutely correct. Associating or specifying an alternate name for an existing server, that is a canonical name record or a CNAME record, so that's not a text record. 10% of you said advertise the public IP address of the email server. That might be an A record. I guess it could also be a quad A record in that particular case. The quad A record would be more along the lines of associating an IPv6 address to a web server. So there's a good example of where quad A would be specified for that one. And then separating the network into different logical sections, that would be more of a VLAN. That really has nothing to do with DNS. So in this particular case, the only one of those answers that had anything to do with a text record is the one to verify domain ownership, and 37% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, I know that we've kind of hit the top of the hour, but I want to do one more question. We can squeeze another one in, right? I think we can. So let's do another question. This one is indeed a 1200 series question. I think this one could also be a 1100 series question. But this next question on our list, let's look at it, asks, 2 drives in a RAID array have failed, but the data in the array continues to be available. Which of the following is most likely configured on this array? Is it RAID 1, RAID 6, RAID 5, RAID 0, or mirroring? Got some choices there. If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. There it is on your screen to lock in what you think the right answer might be. The question again asks, 2 drives in an array have failed, but the data in the array continues to be available. Which of the following is most likely configured on this array? Is it RAID 1, RAID 6, RAID 5, RAID 0, or mirroring? It's got to be one of those, right? Take a stab at that one. See what you think the answer is. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. RAID is obviously a topic that is covered on both the 1100 series and the 1200 series exams, so you need to know a lot about RAID regardless of which exam you happen to be taking. See how you do with this one. People are putting in answers on this one. I'm wondering, we're not quite as plugging those answers in quite as fast as I normally see when we have a large percentage, but I think we should be able to break this one down and understand the details of this. What's interesting about this one is that if you are taking the 1100 series exam, the answer you're looking for is not in this list. I'll explain what we mean with that one. Let's see how you did with this one. 2 drives in an array have failed, but the data in the array continues to be available. Which of the following is most likely configured on this array? Is it RAID 1, RAID 6, RAID 5, RAID 0, or mirroring? Let's have a look at what you answered. Again, we're not quite sure which one we would have chosen in this scenario. If we go with the plurality of you chose RAID 6 at 39%. Those of you that are studying for your Core 1 on the 1100 series, wondering why people chose that one, because RAID 6 is not on the 1100 series. That was added to the 1200 series. 27% said the answer was RAID 5. 15% say mirroring, 14% say RAID 1, and only 5% said RAID 0. So let's look at what the correct answer might be. 38.68% of you chose the answer RAID 6 is what we would find. This is the one that you would see that is associated with RAID. This is from my video, section 3.4 on RAID, that we would be able to work through. And that's because if you are working through a RAID type issue with RAID 6, it's just one better than RAID 5. For those of you already familiar with RAID 5, you know that RAID 5 adds a bit of parity to a section of the drive so that if you lose a drive, you can recreate the data by using that parity. But RAID 6 adds 2 parity type inputs, which means we could technically now lose 2 separate drives to be able to still continue to be up and running. So this is one where we just don't trust our drives. We're just not happy with our hard drives. We lose a drive, system's still running. But since we lost a drive, we lost some of that parity. But if we can now pull from the extra parity, we got spare parity. We got RAID 6 parity that we can pull from. We can still be up and running if we lose another drive. We don't want to lose more than 2. There is a limit, of course, and with RAID 6, that limit is 2 drives. You don't want to lose more than one of those. You will need an extra drive, add some additional parity, configure it for RAID 6. One of the things that I mentioned here is that if you were studying the 1100 series, there's one other RAID type you need to know for both the 1100 and 1200 series, where you could potentially lose 2 drives and still be up and running, and that would be RAID 10. Sometimes you'll see that written as RAID 1 plus 0. But as you know, 1 plus 0 was not one of the potential answers here. The only answers in here that were available were RAID 1, RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 6. Now, I also put mirroring on here because I ran out of RAID numbers. There were no more RAIDs that I could pull from. But mirroring is also a term that we use to describe another RAID type. And for those of you familiar with RAID, you know that RAID 1 also does mirroring. So often you'll hear somebody say, how is this RAID configured? Oh, it's set up in a mirror. And that should automatically make you think, oh, that's RAID 1. So you're set up with RAID 1. In fact, if you combine those two, we get 29%, which is not bad. Came in second place, really, if you combine those together. RAID 5 will work if you lose 1 drive, but not if you lose 2 drives. Same thing for RAID 1. We can lose 1 drive because we're mirrored, but we can't lose 2 drives from RAID 1. That would be a problem because now we've lost maybe 1 here and one on one side of the mirror and 1 on the other side of the mirror. Now our entire array is down. So that's one we don't want to pull from on a RAID 1. And then we've got RAID 0, which is no duplication or redundancy at all. You don't have anything that you can pull from there. You lose any drive on RAID 0, you've lost your data. So that is why RAID 0 is 0 redundancy, because if you lose anything on RAID 0, you are out of business. The answer here is indeed RAID 6. That's the answer that we were looking for in this particular scenario. And if you are someone who is familiar with RAID, you probably did just fine on that. Got it in there with perfect example. RAID 10 would not be a good answer for this one because RAID 10, you cannot lose well, I guess it would be, grade 10 could be an answer on here, but it wasn't an answer, which is why it's not an answer. But it could be potentially. If I had asked you in this question, 2 drives have failed, the data continues to be available, which one of these could possibly be configured on this array? I could have put RAID 1, RAID 6, and RAID 10 on here, and possibly that could have been applied to this. That wasn't the question. That was really talking about you lose 2 drives anywhere in the array, you're still up and running. What are you running? You're running RAID 6. That is the answer we were looking for. Well, all those topics we talked about today come directly from the exam objectives. What do you mean you haven't downloaded the exam objectives yet? You should get your hands on these. They tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. This is a set of the objectives right here. It is a bullet by bullet, topic by topic breakdown of everything you need to know. Everything. And it is page after page after page after page of information that you need to be familiar with. This is exactly the information and details that are going to help you understand if you've really learned what you need to know before walking into the exam room. So if you ever need anything to test you, to check where you happen to be with your knowledge, this is the document you need. This document is available on the CompTIA website. There's no single source for these documents. You have to go to the exact page you need on the CompTIA website after they're redesigned. But I do have a link that will at least take you over to CompTIA.org. You should just easily type in CompTIA.org or type in CompTIA A+ exam objectives. You may be able to find it that way in your favorite search engine. It is a valuable tool and it's free. Also very nice. The free part I like. This is a great thing to read through before you start your studies. It is an especially good thing to use after you're finished your studies and you're wondering, am I ready to take my exam? This document will tell you. It's a great checklist. Have a look at that one, professormesser.com/objectives, or simply look for and search for the CompTIA exam objectives on the CompTIA website, and you'll find everything that you need to be able to download and use those objectives. We have so many other live streams coming up this month. We're just getting started with July. If you are studying for your A+ certification, you might want to show up 2 days from now. This is a Tuesday as we're doing this live. On Thursday, we're doing another A+ study group, but this one's for the Core 2. So it's for the 1202 exam. So if you're also either studying or planning to study for your Core 2, you might want to come back for a whole new set of brand new questions and another set of tests to see how well you might know some of these topics. That is on July the 10th. And if you want to look into next month, I have scheduled on the August calendar, the 5th and the 7th as our next A+ study groups. Of course, we still have Network Plus study groups this month, Security Plus study groups, or you might be watching this video on a replay months from now and you're wondering, when is the next live event? Well, I'm glad you asked because it's right here at the bottom. Go to professormesser.com/calendar and you will know exactly when the next live events will be. We'd love to have you join us. Come on back for another set of Q&A and questions that you can ask of me in the after show with our Professor Messer study group, something that you might help with already. Well, our first hour of study groups is over. Boy, that went by quick, but don't worry. We've got a lot more questions coming. In this case, you're going to be asking the questions in our after show. Stay exactly where you are. It starts in just a few seconds. We will have you asking questions straight away and figuring out what you need to know about these exams. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers on our website, professormesser.com/vouchers, and our course notes, our success bundle, and there's even more coming in the future as far as study materials. You find out more at professormesser.com/1201success. And of course, we're all over the internet. You can find us at professormesser.com/Discord/X/Twitter/YouTube/Facebook/LinkedIn. Just type in / wherever you'd like to find us, and we will probably be there. If we're not, tell us where you would like us to be, and we'll add some into that social media site as well. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. Stick around for our after show, a lot more Q&A to come. And if you have specific questions you'd like to ask of me, now's the time to do it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us in this first hour. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay. Let's now transition over. Let me get a sip. One moment, please. Let's now transition over into the after show, everybody. It's our after show where I will take questions from you in our after show. The way that we do this is I bring up a set of questions that I would like to ask or have you ask of me. We have these available right here. Let's close this poll that we have in front of us. We get this here, and I can tell you that if you would like to ask a question for the second hour, you can do it at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA and submitting that question. There's probably a few that are right there that I can go through, figure out the details, and we can see what information you would like to know about. You can do that by going to professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to bring up the list of questions right now. You've got quite a few in here and have them all available. There's quite a bit available on the website. There are questions everywhere that people are working through. And to start us off with questions that we have, let's talk about exams. Let's talk about how long it takes to study for an exam. And let's talk about what exams you might want to study for if you're planning this right now as we sit here in July of 2025. This is a question that came to us from Daniel T, who says, how long does an average person take to study the CompTIA A+, 1101 or 1201, whatever these two combinations are? You need these two exams. Daniel says, just wanted to get a glimpse of how long it takes to study one of these. Well, this is there is no average person, I think, when it comes to studying these industry certification exams. Everybody has a different background. Everybody has a different base of knowledge they're working from. Everybody studies at a different rate. It's difficult to pin it down. But if I had to pick a time frame for these, the time frame that, and most people, I think, study for these exams, each exam is somewhere around 2 to 3 months on average. Now, obviously, if you've been working in this industry for a while, you may not need 2 to 3 months. You might need 2 weeks. Some people have come to my site, taken the exam a week later, passed their certification, they're on to the next thing because they've already been working in the industry so long. But their manager said, we have an internal requirement that you get an A+ cert. Even though you're overqualified, you still have to get it. And they went out and they got it. But I think most people are not in that position. I think most people are starting at ground zero. They're trying to learn all of these different technologies. And for those folks, it generally takes 2 to 3 months of study. Now, if you're like me, I take much longer. I like to really understand everything. I do all the side quests, all of them. I leave no stone unturned. I am a completionist when it comes to almost everything that I do. And studying for an industry certification exam is another really good example of that. I like to have every checkbox checked, everything that should be known. I should know it prior to going into the room. Probably because I get super nervous taking these exams. I'm not a good test taker. That's been my excuse through school anyway. No, I'm not a good test taker. That's why the grade was so bad. In reality, it's probably because I didn't study well enough. But if you study well enough, it's remarkable how well you go through the process of really understanding the content. And when you know the content, everything just becomes so simple. It's a lot less stress. It's much easier to go through the content of these. So that's why if you are focusing on studying for these exams, don't worry if it takes you 2 months. Don't worry if it takes you 3 months. Don't worry if it takes you 6 months. The objective is to ultimately pass the exam. There's no clock that's ticking. There's no time frame. Nobody's standing over you and saying, it's been 2 months. You got to take this exam. No, it's not the way it works. In fact, I am very much very much in the world of not setting arbitrary deadlines. I hate arbitrary deadlines. This, I think, comes to me from too many years in corporate America, because we're so good at setting really unusually arbitrary deadlines and then forcing people to work towards this arbitrary date, regardless of how unrealistic that date happens to be. So for you, 2 to 3 months may be completely unrealistic, but 6 months is probably perfect. So don't worry if you think you're taking too long. There is no too long. The objective is that you pass the exam. You should study for however long it takes for you to be able to walk into that room and pass the certification exam. So that's my recommendation. I think on average 2 to 3 months, but I also think that you should not dwell on that number. I think you should instead find the number that's right for you and then go work towards earning your certification. Now, obviously, the thing that does throw a little bit of a wrench into this schedule is the exams themselves. For example, I brought this up earlier, which was the timeline. This is the wrench because normally you would be back here studying for your A+, and you've got years before these exams are retired. So because of that, you're purchasing books. You're investing your time watching a video training course. You've gone through some practice exams. Maybe you've purchased some labs. You've made some type of financial investment into this certification, and you would like to be able to use that investment. But now we're not back here on this orange bar. We're way up here. We're right in the middle right now between these two bars, this blue one starting and the orange one ending. So if you have invested all of this time and effort into passing the 1101 and the 1102, you only have until September 25th to finish this. So if you're one of these 6-month folks, this might not be the set of exams for you. You've only got about 3 months left. And that's not a lot of time to pass 2 separate exams. Now, if you're already past your first exam and you're now trying to finish up the second exam, you're still okay. You're still good. As we sit here in July of 2025, you still have enough time to study all of that material, take your exam, pass it, be A+ certified for 3 years. You're in great shape. Don't worry. But for those of you that may just be starting this process, you're just getting into the study and you're even trying to figure out, well, what book do I need? Which video course should I watch? What labs should I purchase? Those are all good questions. And because of that, you might want to start down here on the 1200 series because now you still have 3 years left for that particular investment. So that's the important part of these two. Now, here's another good part of this. For those of you wondering, and people in the chat room were even asking, well, what is the difference then between the orange bar, the 1100 series, and the blue bar, the 1200 series? Is there a difference? Well, there's always a difference. There's always an update to the exam objectives when they produce a new course. They get rid of some older technologies. They change the different objectives they feel are important to have in this exam, and maybe they add some additional content. But how much did they cover? This is the one that shows this. So here is, if you want to show a comparison of the two, you need a good chart. You need a nice Venn diagram. So we've got our Gantt chart. Great. Need it. We also need a good Venn diagram. I got you as well. We're covered. So this is a comparison between the 1101 Core 1 exam and the 1201 Core 1 exam. So these are the 2 exams, but the 2 different versions of that first exam. And everything that is in the middle in green are the things that are the same. It's a big circle. It's a big middle green area. Everything that is yellow are the things that are dropped from the 1101 on the new version, and the blue are the things that are new. You'll notice that the yellow and blue are very small. They're very narrow. That's for a reason. And this is an interesting story about how this is different, because normally the green is much smaller, the yellow is much bigger, and the blue is much bigger. But from this diagram, you can see that of the total objectives, which are somewhere around 390-ish objectives on both of these, the size of the exams didn't change very much, as you can tell, because the circles are effectively the same size or very similar in size. But we had 58 objectives that were dropped, 49 objectives that were added. So really, only 13% of the new exam is brand new, and only 15% of the old objectives were dropped. Not a lot of change. 13% swing on both sides of this. Normally, that number is closer to 30. So why was there not a big change between the exam that was released 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, and the exam that's been released now? What happened in that time frame that would have caused our entire industry to slow down to a complete halt? Oh, that's right. We were stuck inside with COVID-19. So because of that, effectively every industry stopped for a year. Really, that was about right. It took a long time to ramp up. Probably you could even argue that it's even longer than that. But the thing that's interesting is when the 1101 was released, the newest version of Windows that was out was Windows 11. When the 1201 was released in March, the newest version of Windows that was out was Windows 11. Nothing changed with Windows. Nothing changed really with our underlying operating systems. So because of that, we have much smaller set of objectives that has changed between these two versions than there ever has been. Normally, it's much more change between these two. Advantage goes to you because of this. If you're one of these people that have been studying for your 1100 series and you're wondering, oh, do I really want to transition over? There's obviously a cost associated with getting new books, associated with getting new labs, getting new exams. There's obviously a cost associated with that. Those costs are relatively low when you compare it to the cost of getting the certification. Because of that, you could probably make an argument that, yeah, it's not, we can make the move. We could move from the 1100 series to the 1200 series if we had to, and we would not have to do a lot of backtracking. We would not have to do a lot of additional study because so much of these two exams is very similar to each other because of this green part that's right in the middle is 349 objectives that are identical to each other between these exams. So a lot of people ask me all the time, should I transition over? Should I go? I've been studying for this one. Should I go study for the new one? And normally my answer is that, oh, you don't want to have to kind of start over with a lot of this. 30% of the exam is new. If you look at the older Security Plus between the 600 and 700 series, 50% of the exam was new. Half of the exam was brand new. So sometimes they're very dramatic in their changes. This right here is a huge advantage to you because now you can make a decision and not have a huge downside regardless of which way you go, which is a good position to be in. So this is one of those, you can flip a coin. You are a winner either way because of this, because of it. We can thank COVID thank you, COVID, for doing this. What a horrible thing to thank for putting us in this position. But that's really what happened, is we now have an advantage. Finally, we're seeing a little bit of a silver lining from that time that we went through. For those of you wondering, I did a similar comparison to the Core 2. We'll talk about this one next week. You can see the Core 2 exam a little bit bigger and a lot more new content. 18% of that one is new. We only dropped 15% from the old one. But you can really see a difference visually in the difference between these two exams. Next, or on Thursday, a couple days from now, we'll go through more of the Core 2 piece. But those, I think, are important to know about as well. Things you need to know, things you need to be familiar with, because those might come up when you're going through your process of trying to make the decision. Do I stay on the 1100 series? Do I jump to the 1200? Will I have to go backwards? And if so, how much? That'll at least give you some insight on the things that you need to know. We're taking more questions. If you would like to ask those questions, you can go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in those questions, and I will sift through them as I am here on the screen to see what options might be there. This is a great place to go to get familiar with these. One of the things that you will find with the CompTIA exams is they are available worldwide. These exams can be taken in really any country, and now, of course, anywhere, because you can take the exam online, but the exams are also available in different languages. So you can take them in your native language if it happens to be one that is available for the A+ certification exams. This question came in and asks, is this certificate, well, not on that screen, it isn't, is this certificate, there we go, relevant in Europe, specifically France? This is a certificate. The CompTIA certification is one that is known around the world, but even within the United States, there are different areas of the United States that may be looking for different certifications. For example, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area of the United States, it's our nation's capital, you might be in Virginia, DC, Maryland, that area of the world, there tends to be a larger emphasis in the security-related certification. So Security Plus might be more popular there than other CompTIA exams and certifications. But in other parts of the country, if you're in Dallas, if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in Minneapolis, if you're in Chicago, A+ might be more popular. It just depends on what the organization is looking for and the type of certifications they would like you to have. Same thing applies for other countries. In the UK, in France, in Germany, in Japan, there are different certifications that are popular. And it's very geographical. It's very different depending on the type of work that is done with technology in those countries. So it's also, and where I think most people would get the best answer to this, it's also important that you go to the job postings for your particular country or your particular area of your country to see in these job postings for help desk, for entry-level technician, for system administrator, for operating system management, what certifications are they asking for? What skills are they asking for? And do those certifications and skills map back to the things you learn in the A+? So I don't have an answer for you on, is this certificate relevant in France? All I really can do is sort of point you towards the things that will tell you if that certification is relevant in your particular geography. And I think that will help you determine at least how valid it might be to go through the process of earning the cert, because I think most of us go through this process of getting an industry cert because we're hoping to get a job or better job with it. That's not 100%, of course. A number of people take this certification just to see if they know the content, just to be more familiar with the technology. Some people go through my course and end up not taking the exam because they're not interested in getting the cert. They just want the knowledge that the cert brings. We sometimes forget that. We sometimes forget that the certification is actually teaching us something. We're so focused on getting the piece of paper at the end. I just need the cert so I can get a job. We're forgetting, oh, it actually taught us something. So it's the Saturday morning cartoon syndrome where you've enjoyed yourself. It's been entertaining for the last 30 minutes, but at the end of it, we might have learned something. So that's another one of those that might actually help you in the path and decision-making you make towards what certification you get. That might be a consideration. So have a look at job postings in your area. That's going to tell you a lot about what might be popular or not popular in your neck of the woods. Let's keep going through the list of questions that you got. Thank you for submitting so many questions, by the way. There's a lot here to go through, and I'm on a tight schedule. I got 30 minutes left. So let's keep going through this list and see what other things are listed in there. Oh, so this is a pretty good one. This is kind of a follow-up on things I said earlier in the live stream. I mentioned that there were a number of topics that were removed from the Core 1 exam between the 1101 and the 1201. I mentioned the troubleshooting process is not specifically written out. The stages of laser printer process are not part of the 1201. The individual wireless standards, the IEEE standards, 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, 802.11n, they're not in there anymore. We don't have to know what frequencies they use. And you're probably not going to run into an 802.11a, b, g, or n. Maybe you might run into an n somewhere, but the others you're certainly not going to find these days. And so it's not important to know those. And indeed, it probably isn't incredibly important that we memorize what frequency ranges they use. So CompTIA was smart to get rid of those things. So there are a number of different topics on the exam that are suddenly not there anymore. So the question from Ralph asks, you talked about the troubleshooting process in Core 1. From what I understand, that's not been removed. Yes, it has been. But we should know this process as a background competency in the 1201 exam. Well, there's obviously still a section on troubleshooting. But having to memorize the troubleshooting process is no longer in the 1201 exam objectives. And that's why I mentioned that. So let's have a look then, because if you go off to my website, I'm going to bring this up. Let's do this. Let me bring up a window. Let's have a look at the Professor Messer website. We're going to go over here. Under the 220.1201, there's a section for the free 220.1201 Core 1 videos. Oh, thank you for the ad, Google. We'll put that one in here. So if you go there, one of the things at the top of the page is what's new in the 220.1201. Click here to read our detailed breakdown. And I did create a detailed breakdown that goes through all of the things we've already talked about, but I go through every single section of every domain in the 1101 and I tell you what's been dropped. And I go through every subdomain on the 1201 and I tell you what's been added. This is a pretty I've never seen a detailed overview published like this. We've always had it behind the scenes. I've always kept it because I have to know this to be able to produce these training courses, but I've never published it before. Well, this is the publishing of this. So in fact, you'll recognize a number of these, like the Gantt chart we looked at earlier. If you wanted another copy of the Venn diagrams, they're also in here. But then I go through what topics were dropped between the 1101 and 1201, and I go through every single section, like domain 1. A lot of these don't have any drop topics in them, but when we do drop information, it's listed here. So for example, let's go down things like the specific 802.11 standards were dropped from that were normally in the 1101 domain 2. If we go down to section 5, for example, the troubleshooting process has been dropped. It's not in there anymore. So I do show you, in fact, that's the only thing in domain 5 that was dropped. That's quite the breakdown. All right, if that's what was dropped, what topics were added to the 1201? And I go through the same process again and break down every single one of the subdomains. And I show you all of the topics, or a very broad breakdown of what topics were added to this mix. And you can see in section 5, there were a number of troubleshooting processes that were added. So although they got rid of the specific troubleshooting process, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, they added a number of things that you need to know how to troubleshoot. So they took a rote memorization and added more of a practical knowledge piece to the exam objectives. And I think that's great. I think that's what we want. So that is my list that's over on the CompTIA, on my website, on the professormesser.com website. So it might be something you can use to become more familiar with those details. A lot of information in there can really make you more familiar with what you might want to study if you do shift from one version to another. They're all in there. And a lot of times I'll post out places, I'll put messages on Twitter, I'll put a response in Reddit, and I'll say, well, here's the percentage of things that have changed. And people will say, no, it isn't. It's much bigger than that, or it's much smaller than that. Well, all right, well, let me publish then the entire view so that you can see where I'm getting these numbers from. I don't make these numbers up. They're not from the Department of Number Making things. They're not magical. I'm really counting the number of objectives. I am sitting down with both sets of objectives. I'm comparing. I'm marking which things have been dropped. I'm marking which things have been added, and that's what's in that document. So you can do that yourself, of course. Go through the process. If you don't think my information is correct, go through and do it yourself. Figure out if that really is a good representation of the two, and you'll be just as familiar with those objectives as I am, which at this point is very, very, very familiar. I am super familiar with the objectives, as I always tend to be whenever we start making these study groups and making the videos and everything else. So that is exactly where we would go to find all of that information. More questions. Let's keep going through this list to be able to see what you may be asking about. Let's see in here. A lot of good information, a lot of questions in here about this. This is one. We've talked a little bit about this earlier. I talked about, there was a section in our first hour where I talked about renewing your certification. As I mentioned, it's good for 3 years, but you can renew it and get another 3 years out of it. And you can renew it after that and get another 3 years. You can just keep renewing it. You should never have to take the exams again. Now you could, if you wanted to take the newer version of exams to renew an old exam, you could do that. That is probably the worst way to renew your certification given your other options. Relative to all of the other options you have, that's the worst option because that's the most time consuming and probably the most costly as well because you have to pay for 2 certification exams to do that. CompTIA does create another set of options for you. Quite a few. For example, Terry asks, can you talk about CertMaster CE that's continuing education, for A+ renewal. CompTIA does have a way on their website that you could step through a renewal process that takes about a day and you've renewed your certification. You don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to take a third-party certification exam. You don't have to take a higher-level CompTIA exam. You don't have to pay annual maintenance fees. You just take the CertMaster CE, and once you answer all those questions absolutely correct, which is something you can do at home on your own computer, there's no time clock. You can just keep taking the tests that they have there until you get them all right, and you've renewed your certification. If you go out to the CompTIA website, they've obviously changed quite a bit on their website in the last number of weeks. Earlier in June, they did a revamp to their website. But they have here things about, let's see where they put all of their resources under the certifications, which is where we should be. We're going to go to A+. And in the A+ certification, they have a lot of different A+. There is the Core 1 version 15, that's the 1201. Core 2 version 15, that's the 1202. A combination, Core 1 and Core 2 for this latest version. And then there's the same thing for the older versions. That will obviously be half as many circles on the screen once September 25th hits. But let's look at, for example, the Core 1 and Core 2 of the previous version. I'm going to click on that. And it tells you this is the version that will be retiring in September. They have a list of breakdown of all the objectives on the screen. But they also have under the buy now, you could buy vouchers on their site. So those are listed as part of the view on there. The one I want to show you, let me see if I can find the one that I have available. It's under the CertMaster CE. I think they have an entire page on this that is not in that list that I have. There it is. It's right here. This is the page I wanted to show you, which is there. Complete a CompTIA CertMaster CE course. So this is one where they talk about for the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, how can I renew this without having to take a separate exam, without having to collect CEUs? That's what they do. You just take CertMaster CE for A+. They give you a breakdown of what you need to know. This is, for this version, you need to have passed something earlier than the 1101 and 1102. The newer version of CertMaster CE is also available for you people that did pass the 1101 and 1102. And it says that you can't renew by completing a CE course you've already taken. You have to wait for the newer ones to come out. So you can't renew the newest until you get the newer CertMaster CE, which is going to be important. It takes about 8 to 10 hours, depending on your knowledge. So you can do this in a day. You submit it and you're renewed for 3 years. You can do it. Now, the cost of this, if you were to look at, I think the cost of this depends on where you are in the world, but it is, if you were to calculate for 3 years, if you paid the annual maintenance, it's only a little bit more expensive than that 3-year maintenance cost. So there is a nice benefit, a nice cost-benefit ratio there to be able to use it. So you can really come up to the last day of your renewal, the last one that you would get to, and that's something that can really help you along those lines, getting that last day of the things that are there. And you're renewed. You can do that. So yeah, for those of you, if you currently are A+ certified, you can renew it with CertMaster CE right now. You can do it immediately. In fact, I'm going to flip this over to the CertMaster CE for A+. I know we mentioned the older version. I'm going to look real quick out here at the newer version and make sure that it's there for the Core 1 and Core 2. I'm going to go buy now. And if I buy now, it does say, yes, CertMaster CE is available for the latest version. You just have to have passed the 1101, 1102 version of A+ or earlier, and you would be able to use this latest version of CE to be able to renew. Now, when can you renew? You can renew whenever you want. You can renew the day after you earn the cert. So that effectively gives you 6 years of renewal time, if you want to look at it that way. So there's different ways to do it. Now, if you end up taking a higher level certification exam, the certification timeframes don't work the same way. I have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, on how to renew your A+ Network Plus or Security Plus in just a few hours, where I talk all about the CertMaster CE. I also talk about all of the other methods of renewal as well, and I explain the advantages and disadvantages of all of them. so that you can make a decision on what renewal process works best for me, because everybody works a little bit differently. But gosh, Cert Master CE is so easy. It's so quick. You can use it whether you've waited until the very last second, like I tend to do. So if you're a procrastinator and you wait a long time and you're thinking, oh, wait, my certification renews tomorrow, you could still get this, take it, submit it, and you're renewed, and you just got under the wire there. So you people that are still working on your taxes, this is for you. And it's for me. So this might help you as well. Cert Master CE is a good choice. And it's one that's been around for a long time. So absolutely have a look at those options, or have a look at the video. You might find an upgrade or option that works better for you. Some of you may not even realize that you've done things in your job that give you enough continuing education units to renew your certification right now without doing anything extra other than paying your 3 years of maintenance fees. So you may have found that you've gone to a trade show, you've attended some training. Sometime in the last 3 years, if you've put enough of those CEUs together, you may have already renewed. You just don't know it. The details for renewal on the CompTIA website, they can tell you exactly what that happens to be. That is a good one to have there. Let's keep going through this list of what things people are asking about with the A+. We do have some time left there. I'm going to take another sip because I can tell my voice is not happy. The questions that you submitted, by the way, are fantastic. Thank you for submitting these and putting them in the mix of this. This is a pretty good one. People, I think, get a little bit wrapped up in the details of this. But I think maybe sometimes people only hear things they want to hear. So now I get to break it down for you. It's from Jacob, who says, is it better to learn about computer hardware hands-on for the exam or just learn online? Or why are you limiting yourself? Why are you limiting yourself to only one style of learning? As I mentioned in my introductory video for the 1201 and 1202 exams, I think you should be using many different methods to learn. Not just watch videos. You should do a lot more than that. And we refer to this as the WRAP method, W-R-A-P, the WRAP method, where we'd love it if you watch some training videos. We think there's value in seeing someone demonstrate these capabilities on the screen, go through the Windows front end and show you where these are, click on the application itself and show you what happens. And one of the things you'll notice in our 1202 course, every Windows feature is demonstrated in that video course, because I wanted to give you different ways to interpret the information that you're viewing in a static video, because videos are relatively static. It's you watching me do things on my screen. But there's value in learning some of that content from somebody who's been in the industry and can demonstrate some of those capabilities to you. The R in the WRAP method is reading a good book, because videos teach you in a way that are different than the way that books teach you. Books are very dense, but they require you to really concentrate on the information. Videos are relatively high level because it's a different way of receiving that information. It's not quite as dense in the way that information is provided to you. So these are different ways to learn, but they also, I think, fire different synapses in your brain. They're a different way of learning that I think work very well with each other. And so I never tell people, oh, only watch the videos, you're fine. You should watch videos, you should read books. There's the WR. The A is to apply that information that you've learned in some way, ideally in a hands-on way. So this would be labs. This would be going to the command line and going through the same process that we're doing on our screen. One of the things you'll notice is a lot of the commands that I do, especially in the networking section, are commands you can do on your own computer and watch how it works on your computer as compared to mine. So that applying yourself and being able to take those topics and physically do them is another way of learning. I think it uses some of that muscle memory, that typing on the keyboard. If you're a musical type person, you play a musical instrument, then you know about that muscle memory. Sometimes you'll be playing a song. If you're on a trombone, your arm just goes to where the notes are. If you're on a piano, you don't even think about where the keys are anymore. You're just typing on that keyboard. I think you're a better typer because you're a piano player, as a matter of fact. So that's one of those where physically doing it does help you. And I think it's an important part of that, important enough that it's the third part of that process. WRA is for applying yourself. And the P is practice. Practice questions specifically. How do you know if you've really learned everything if you haven't tested yourself? And that's really what the P is that practice test. That is the one that we want to be able to bring everything together into one single cohesive set of study materials. There's not any one thing that does everything, but you should be able to pull from the best 4 different sources for video, for books, for labs, and for practice questions. With those 4, you've got everything you need to be able to learn these topics, practice these topics, and be ready and test yourself for the exam. That is our RAP method. It's the one that I think you should always be focusing on. It's never any one thing. Now, some of you might be able to get rid of one of those. Maybe you don't need the hands-on. You've just got a WRP method. Doesn't work so well whenever working through that. But it does speak to the fact that you may already know some of this content, so you don't necessarily have to sit down and do the ping command. You've done the ping command lots of times. You know what it's like. You don't have to do any hands-on with that one. Everybody, as I mentioned, has a different foundational knowledge they're working with. You might want to go through the ping command. That may be very important. You might want to become more familiar with it because you haven't used it a lot before. Other people might have. So you get to make that decision for yourself. That is my recommendation. If you're trying to learn what's on this exam and how do I study for it, it's not just any one thing. There's no easy button you can push. You have to be able to apply yourself across all of those different areas, find all the study materials that make sense for you, and be able to use those. I have had people come to me and say, I don't do good with reading. I have some type of reading issue. Maybe I just don't like to read. Maybe you're dyslexic. Maybe you have some other type of reading comprehension problem. I have a problem sitting down and just spending time reading. And in that scenario, maybe a video course works best. Maybe instead of watching one video course, you watch 2 video courses. That's another way to sort of supplement some of that, just to make sure that you're getting all of the information you need to pass this certification exam. That's my recommendations. Maybe that gives you some place you can go to think about what works for you. That's one of the strategies. The RAP method is a good one from our perspective. It's one that has worked over and over and over again, and one that you might want to consider using as well. Let's keep going through this list of things that are here. There were a number of people that are talking about the P in the RAP method was the practice exam. And you'll notice with the 1101 and 1102, we have our practice exams book. This is a copy of the 1101 practice exams book. So this is all if you're studying for that 1101, 1102, we've got practice exams book for you. They're big. These are big practice exams book. A lot of great content in here. And a lot of you are saying, where's the 1201 and 1202 practice exams? I don't see them on the website yet. No, you don't. But don't worry. I am actively working on these right now. As many of you know, I write all of the content of these practice exams books. And I also update all of the prior questions that still apply, because some of them have references to topics that have been dropped. So unlike other practice exams that you will ultimately find for these 1201 and 1202 exams, these have been written to specifically address only the objectives that are in the 1201 and 1202 exams, which I dare say I still have not found another source that does it that way. I don't know why they ask you questions that aren't on the exam, but they still seem to do that in these other sources. So this is still a couple weeks away to be able to get these out. That's okay. Maybe even faster than I'm thinking about it, but we are actively writing. I say we in the royal we. I'm the one who's actively writing all the questions for these and putting all the content into these next 2 books, because I think that's the best way to do it. These are human written books that are accurate. They are high quality. They have been written by somebody who's been in the industry, that knows everything they need to know about these certification exams. It is something that we think is a valuable study tool, and we are absolutely working on that to be able to do that. You will not find these on Amazon. You will not find these in a bookstore. You will not find these anywhere acceptprofessormesser.com when they are available. The 1101 and 1102 obviously are now. The 1201 and 1202 are coming soon. Keep checking back. They'll be on the main menu of the website under the 1201 menu or the 1202 menu. You will see them the moment they are available. Trust me. And they're really good. I'm really liking the newest set of practice exams books. They're extremely useful there, and you will find them all written up on the website. If you're interested in buying the 1100 series, they're already available on the website under the main menus for the 1101 and 1102. And there's also a little bit of a discount if you get both of these at the same time. Another advantage, I think, if you're studying for both of those exams. So you might want to get practice exams. You might want to get course notes. You might want to get everything and just line them up and be able to have them there. So I saw a number of different questions come through. Where's the exams? Exams take a bit of time to write. So we are getting them together, but they're going together swimmingly. Another advantage of there being so many similarities between both exams is that there's a little bit of advantage for me when I'm creating some of the content. So it is going to much faster than it went 3 years ago. I'll put it that way. So that makes me happy too, to have that there. Other questions here. Somebody said the 1101 part of your website seems to include a lot less than the 1201. Well, as you know, the objectives are very different. But I think the 1200 series video courses are bigger than the 1100 series. We expanded them out quite a bit, especially in the Core 2 is much larger than the previous version because we added some additional content. We wanted to really have more. You told us we want more demonstrations. We want to see you go through that process. We just don't want a static screen that says, here's what it looks like. We want to see it. So we added tons more. Practically everything that could be demonstrated, we demonstrate on the newest Core 2. So you'll notice it's much bigger. So I don't agree that some folks that say it looks smaller. Oh, it's not. Trust me, I'm the one that put it together. It is not much smaller. It is much bigger. So that part's good. The only thing you won't see, obviously, we just talked about practice exams books, but those are coming too. So and when we have this conversation next month, there won't be much to talk about because everything will be published, I'm hoping, by that time. I never set any deadlines because I think that limits the quality of the ultimate product. I think if we want the best product, I will work on the best possible output and it will just be ready whenever it is ready. Kind of frustrating to have to not know when it's going to be released, but when it is released, you will know that it is ready to be released. And that, I think that's more important. In my world, that's more important anyway. These certification exams are important. People's careers are relying on this. Their ability to feed their family is relying on this. Their future financial stability is relying on this. So why wouldn't you want the highest quality study materials you can get? And I think that's been our philosophy from the very beginning. It will continue to be our philosophy going forward. We're not stopping with that concept. We will always provide you with the latest and best and most accurate towards the exam objectives. Okay, next on our list, more questions coming through because I'm getting near the top of the hour and we want to get a couple more in this mix. Oh, by the way, some people did ask. So if you've already purchased our success bundle for the 1201 or the 1202, when those practice exams are released, they will automatically be added to your online downloadable source. So you will simply log in one day and there they are. They're suddenly available, no additional charge. You'll be able, if you have the success bundle. So that's something that makes it very, very easy. And you can buy them separately or you can buy them together as a bundle. That's completely up to you as well. And that's why I noticed there was somebody that did ask, well, if I bought the success bundle and then you add it to the success bundle, am I getting it too? Absolutely you will. That makes most sense. In fact, our goal this year is to even add some more things to it. So we will see how that goes this year. I want to add even more to the success bundle. I think there's a lot of things we could be adding to it, and we will be adding to it and creating more places and more things that you can do to learn the content that's necessary to earn that certification. Another important part of this. The other piece that a lot of people are talking about is, what do you do first? This is from Chrissy, who asks, which cert do you recommend taking or learning for first? Do you do Security Plus? Network Plus. Do you do that after the A plus? I'm trying to become a red teamer / pen tester in the future. So as a teenager, this is great. You're absolutely on track, Chrissy, by the way, for focusing on where you want to be. So as a teenager, I'm trying to learn through your courses. I can't take the exams yet. Am I doing the right thing? General tips for teenagers trying to delve into this realm. Thank you for your time. This hits me right where I was in high school, because back then, the idea of computers at home were relatively new. So I won't give you exact ages. You could work it out. You can figure out when I was in high school and when I graduated college and all of those things. But it was sort of the early days of PCs. It was the part where we were really trying to understand more about where these PCs fit. Are they only at work? Do we use them at home? The internet obviously had not been created in the form that it is today, connecting consumers to a worldwide network. So the real question that I found myself in, I found computers were interesting. I liked the logic. I liked that there was programming, like you feed information into a computer and the output always is the same every single time, because that's the way computers work, unless you tell it to do something different. And that's where I think people focus on technology as, I want to learn some of this. But obviously the world of IT is enormous. You have operating systems. Do you want to, and inside of operating systems, do you want to learn Mac OS? Do you want to know everything there is about Linux? Do you want to learn everything there is about Windows? Not just Windows. What about Active Directory? Because that's a huge part of Windows in a business environment. Those are 4 very different areas of study where you could spend years of your time earning experience in any one of those individual technologies. And that's just a sliver of what we do in IT. That's just a teeny bit of what we do in IT. There's also networking, switching, and routing, and connecting different networks together, and VPNs, and secure technologies. What about security and the world of IT security? Now you're talking about authentication. You're talking about data encryption. You're talking about encrypting across the wire, talking about physical security. You're dealing with firewalls and VPNs and redundancy in those, large scale implementations of security. All of these are worth spending time on. All of these are worth getting experience on, and all of them pay pretty well in the world of information technology. So I think if you're someone who is really looking at understanding where you should start, there's no rail here. This isn't like you have to start at one place, then you have to go, here's your second stop, and then you have to go to the third place, or you have to go to this fourth. You have to do it in that order. It doesn't work that way. The way that technology tends to work is there are opportunities that are available to you as you sit here right now. Now, I will say that in most environments, when you're talking about red teaming, pen testing, some type of offensive, go after the hacking of the network kind of scenario, that you need some very well-established foundation to be able to get to that point. So the idea being red team or pen tester or offensive security, you've already worked through a number of years of experience, because you can't secure a network unless you understand how a network operates. You can't secure an operating system unless you understand everything about how that operating system operates, especially with security in that operating system. And of course, Windows works very differently than Linux, which also works differently than Mac OS. So you could really be spending a lot of time just on operating systems. I'll give you an example from my perspective, because I worked in probably every broad area of IT in my career. I started in the world of field service. So right out of college, I had a degree in business management. My first job in college was working at a computing center I went to Florida State, their School of Business. So I worked in their computing center and their supercomputers, which was incredible. You learn a lot about high-end computing when you work in those types of environments. I was a lowly operator, which means I sat at the screen of the mainframe and I'd monitor it. And if it stopped working, I would call someone to fix it. That was my job. I didn't fix it. I wasn't smart enough to fix the mainframe, but I was smart enough to go to a list of who's on call and call them to fix the mainframe. So that's the way it worked when I was in college. Then right out of college, I got a job field service. So they would say at the beginning of the day, here's a cable, take this cable to this company, the next county over, and plug it in for them so that it works now, because the cable they have doesn't work. Like, I'm on it. And I would get in my car with my printer cable or video cable, and I would go to that company and say, hi, I'm here with this cable. They go, oh yes, please come in. Here is the system with which the cable is not working. Please fix it, wizard. And I would come in, I'd go, no problem, gotcha, click, click. We do a test print, or we'd plug in the monitor. Oh, it's not blue anymore. It's all colors of the rainbow. It's now fixed. Thank you, oh Swami, and off I go. And that was my job. That was what I did. It was just field service. Now, that was a very simple task, but of course it had relatively complex areas too, where we would upgrade memory. We would replace or install hard drives. We would swap out motherboards because of a warranty repair. So there was some lower level work with that as well, but you got a mix of different things. That's obviously a good entry level job for someone to have in the world of technology. From there, I got into corporate America. That job allowed me the experience to work for an insurance company where I was working in effectively their help desk. This was a service desk, we called it, but it was a help desk. And it was one where everyone was basically in the same building that we had to take care of. And if somebody called, we could do a lot over the phone, but we would generally just go up to their desk, figure out what was going wrong, and then do what we needed to do on the back end to make things work properly. So I got a good knowledge of operating systems. I learned a lot about Windows. I learned a lot about the way that Windows networks. And that led me from there into the world of more server administration. So I became very familiar with administering higher level servers. So now I was more in the server room with all of the equipment, making sure that everybody could connect. I'd go in the morning, make sure all the servers were up and running, make sure that everybody was connected. If there were upgrades that needed to be done, patches that needed to be implemented, I would be doing those on the servers. That gave me the knowledge that I needed to understand how everything networked together. And that allowed me to move into the world of network administration at that same company. And the network administration, now I learned more about how do we connect all these systems together? How does this Ethernet connection work? Where are all these packets coming from? Can I look at the frames going across the network? How is it transmitted across our wide area network? And I began to get more into protocol analysis and understanding things at the protocol level. That was fascinating because now you're really lifting the hood of the network and really understanding how all of that communication really happens. Not only that, you can now tell and recognize when the communication is not working well. Protocol analysis tells you everything. It is the ultimate in understanding what's happening on technology, especially communication between technology devices. Once you understand the network and now you understand operating systems, now you can secure them. So we're talking, 10 years have gone by in doing this, in this story. So 10 years later, now I can get a job looking at something that's security related. And I moved from my job as a server network administrator working for the company that made the sniffer, made the protocol analyzer. Network General was the name of that company. I worked there for years and was a systems engineer. So I represented the product, showed people how it worked, did demonstrations and evaluations of the technology and asked them how many would they like. And that's was what my job was, to say, this is amazing technology. Let me show you how amazing it is. That was effectively what I did. Once you have that understanding of communication, a presentation, you're sort of tying in what you know technically with how to present that information to other people. That led me into the world of cybersecurity. So I moved from systems engineering at Network General into systems engineering at Palo Alto Networks and became an expert in next generation firewalls. I say expert because at the time, next generation firewalls did not exist. Palo Alto Networks effectively created that entire technology, and we were the first ones to introduce this technology to the world. And I was one of 5 engineers, maybe 6, that was brought on board to explain to the world how this technology worked. Fascinating stuff. And I worked there for years as well, learning everything I could about cybersecurity, the way large companies were implementing security, ways that large companies were not implementing security. We could talk a whole 2 hours on that one. But then that got me into that blue team and a little bit red team in that, at least a little purple. Much more blue, I think, when you're representing the firewall side of things. But that's how you go from knowing nothing in that world to building the foundation. You can't just jump into being an SE for a next generation firewall company right out of school. You don't have the foundational knowledge you need to understand the context. You might be able to understand how the firewall works, but you don't understand everything that's underneath it. How is it connecting to the network? How does it interact with these operating systems? How does it interact with Active Directory? How does all of this work? And on top of that, how does it work in the world of corporate environments where you never know politically in these environments how that overlays with the technology? And in every company, it's different. In every company, it's you never know how these things are going to go. So although I tell people, keep your eye on the cybersecurity piece. If you want to go red teaming, if you want to be a pen tester, you can absolutely do that. The jobs are out there. The organizations are out there. The opportunities are out there. Absolutely. But you also need to temper that with a direction, with a strategy. How do you get there? Because it's not something you can do right out of school. It's not something you can do without the foundational knowledge. You need the foundation. So like anything else, we have a goal. It's out there. How do I put the building blocks in place? How do I build the staircase to get me from where I am now? And I'll just take it a step at a time. I will level up one way to another and get to that particular job. That's what IT is about. So although you will see things on the internet all the time telling you cybersecurity is the latest hot thing and you could do cybersecurity right now, you don't need any knowledge. Take our 1-week cybersecurity course and you'll be ready for cybersecurity. No, you won't. You won't at all. You won't even be close to that. I notice a lot of colleges have cybersecurity degrees now. How am I supposed to get a job in cybersecurity right out of college when I don't have the skill set? I don't have the foundational knowledge to get a job in cybersecurity right out of college. However, you will eventually need that knowledge. My degree was in business management. It wasn't a technical degree from Florida State University. Even today, Florida State University does not have an information technology degree. Most universities do not, even today, have an information technology degree. And the ones that do have information technology degrees, if you look at the details of it, it's really not an IT degree. But a lot of schools have computer science degrees, which are only somewhat similar in that vein to those pieces of it. So I think that if you are wanting to do that in your career, you can absolutely do that. Cybersecurity was a big draw for me, but I had to build up to it. I had to gather the knowledge and experience and work with organizations that gave me a foundation that I could then build on and jump on top of and say, now I'm ready for the cybersecurity piece. Even then, I've told this story before, I'm not sure Palo Alto Networks wanted to hire me. Not really sure they were a packet guy was really who they wanted to go with. But I begged and I pleaded. I begged and I pleaded my case. And I think they took pity upon me. They said, no, get up, stand up, stop crying. We will hire you. I was like, okay, good. That worked perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. And so everything worked fine. That was good. A little begging, a little pleading, please hire me. Sometimes that works too. There's all kinds of strategies for getting that job. That was mine. That was the one we went with. So I think that's what you should also think about as well. I love the idea of red teaming. I love the idea of pen testing. I would not be good at it. Maybe if I spent more time doing that. My emphasis in cybersecurity was on the blue side. So if you want to talk to me about next generation firewalls, about how they find what they find, how they are integrated into these large scale corporate environments where it's multi gigabit, tens of gigabits of throughput going through a series of firewall. How do you protect a network that big and that fast? It is possible, but it needs to be engineered the right way. there's always nuance. So you need to learn the nuance so that you can answer those questions. I found that cybersecurity was more of a networking job than anything, primarily because I was really focused on the firewall side of things. How do you plug in a firewall into someone's network? Every network's a little bit different. Every network has different technologies they're using. And throw redundancy into the mix. How do you plug in two firewalls at the same time into some of these networks? You need to effectively be very, very, very knowledgeable in network design, maybe in some cases even more knowledgeable in network design than you are in cybersecurity. Just so you have some context there. It all builds on itself. It's all one well-entwined set of knowledge that you need to keep in mind, you need to know about. But that's, I think all of us struggle with that when we're going through our A+, our Network Plus, our Security Plus. We're getting that initial layer, that initial foundation is being built. You're doing the right things to get to the point that you've already focused on. You say, I want to get to that point. I want to do pen testing. I want a red team. I want to be able to work at that level with that type of security. Need to build the foundation now. And that's exactly what you are doing. You're in the right place for that. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep setting a goal towards what you want to do. Sometimes in this world of technology, you'll be pulled one direction or another. You can't predict what's going to happen in the future, and technology is changing under our feet constantly. This will not be the only certifications you ever study for. This will not be the only set of things you need to learn about. This will not be the only set of manuals you ever read. You will be constantly going through this process for the rest of your career. You will, and here's the thing, if you ever feel like I'm never going to know everything in this industry, let me just tell you, you're never going to know everything in this industry. You're thinking that way because you're right. There's too much technology to know everything. There is points where you can be very specific and very niche in a set of technologies and know much more than anybody else. That's what you should be doing. It's all about the niche. So find the niche that works for you and then learn everything you need to know about it, and then some. You need to know more than anybody else about that particular topic. And if you do, you will be very, very valuable in that particular niche. So pick your niche carefully. It would not be, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about this mainframe. Probably not a good idea, but I need to learn everything that there is to know about this next generation firewall, about this pen testing application, about this vulnerability scanner, about packet analysis, about port scanning. That's where you need to be. And there's probably things that you've done outside the scope of work, outside the scope of things you need to do for a job, where you have learned those technologies. You might have a lab at home, you run Nmap all the time. You might have a very well-honed knowledge of all of the different Nmap scanning methods, which ones work well in different situations. Maybe that's you. So those are the first steps. These little things that we do just for fun on our computer to see if we can do it, sometimes become very valuable skills that you will use for the rest of your career. So that's a very quick summary, maybe not a quick summary, of where I started and kind of the path I took. I think it's very similar to other people, but just have in your mind the right expectation for what your next step is going to be. You may not be able to predict where you're going to be 5 years from now. I don't think any of us really accurately can, but you can absolutely predict, what do I want to do next? How do I get to that point? And then just do it one piece at a time. 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you'll be able to look back and say, wow, we really stepped a lot. We made a lot of steps since we set that expectation 5 years ago, and now here we are. It happens all the time. I get such great emails from people where they talk about that. I got my A+ 5 years ago. Look what I'm doing now, running a network, running a cloud-based network, running a security system, whatever it happens to be. These are great stories to get, and I love getting them. But the opportunity is out there, not just because I hear these people telling me the opportunity is out there. I did this. And because of that, that's why we sort of created this crazy experiment that got out of the lab, which is, if I can do it, you can absolutely do this. And the benefit is that it's fun, it's interesting, it's never a dull moment. Every day is a little bit different. and it pays pretty darn well. I think that's a good combo. So you're doing absolutely right thing, Chrissy. Thank you for the question. Thank you everyone for your questions today. That was a great session that we had in the first hour in the Q&A. You guys were really good with the new 1201 topics. We'll have more of those available for you next month on the Core 1, or come back in a couple days if you're studying for your Core 2 or planning to study for your Core 2. I've got all new questions for you on Thursday. We'd love to see you back for our next live event later this week. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on our A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.